Love across continents. I couldn't breathe. My eyes watered and my vision blurred with tears. I tried to speak, to make sound, anything at all, but no sound was made. I placed my palms flat on both sides of the toilet stall as my hands trembled. A single tear dropped from my cheeks and fell to my lap. What was wrong with me? I asked myself over and over again. This has never happened before. Just then the door to the boys' restroom creaked open, and I closed my mouth shut and listened. It was bad enough that I had to run away from class. There was no way I was going to let anyone hear me crying. Katsuki, are you there? It was the familiar voice of Nico, one of my classmates. I sat still, wanted to reply, but again I found myself mumbling, which was the very reason I'd been scolded in class and found myself hiding out in the restroom. This was not how I imagined life in America would be. It all started when my father moved to America to work on a project with colleagues of his. My name is Katsuki Anderson, and when I was told, I was very excited. The idea of moving to America and spending time with my father, who was always busy, was thrilling. I wasn't thrilled to be leaving my friends in Japan, but I was comforted by the fact that I would make new ones in Florida. I was wrong. My father, Anderson Kyoto, was one of the best architects in Japan, but to me, he was one of the best architects to walk the earth. I was in awe of his designs and the ideas he had. This was yet another reason why I was excited to be moving to America. For the first time, I would be close to my dad, close enough to watch him work and to learn a few things from him. My life's dream was to be an architect, like my dad. But America wasn't all sunshine, love and light for me, like I'd hoped. In fact, my very first day in my new school was one of the worst. I went to school that day feeling ecstatic. My smile was so wide, my face hurt. All the other kids laughed and smiled, and I thought everyone was just being friendly. Back in Japan, I was top of the popularity scale. But by lunch break, I understood why everyone kept smiling and laughing at me. Hey, I have a question to ask. A tall boy with a varsity jacket approached me at the cafeteria while I was eating. I looked up, my eyes twinkling and my smile so wide my cheeks hurt. I was so glad someone was talking to me, especially since no one sat with me at the cafeteria. Sure, I pointed at an empty seat beside me. Join me, there's a lot of space. The boy snickered and turned to a group of boys seated at the far end of the cafeteria. They all seemed to be waiting for something. Why do you have a copy of... He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small book. One I recognized. Nautical Mathematics and Design Structure. My eyes widened as I saw the book. When I reached out to grab it, he raised it above my reach. I stood up, pushed my glasses up my nose, and tried to say something. But all I mumbled instead. What was that? Speak up, the boy yelled loudly, and soon the entire cafeteria was looking at us and laughing. My eyes fell to the table. It was my dad's, I mumbled, a little loudly, but the boy kept laughing, and I couldn't help but mumble to myself. Don't be such a geek, and if no one else will tell you, I will. Those glasses make your face look funny, the boy yelled to the amusement of the cafeteria. He threw the book at me and blew gum in my face. See you later, nerd. The rest of that day was spent on my own. It wasn't that I didn't try to make friends, but no one wanted to be friends with the geek. It continued the entire week, from one horrible experience to the other. As required, I'd signed up for gym. Now I had a pretty skinny body, and when I took off my clothes in the boys' changing room, I heard snickers and whistles. Immediately I rushed to put on my gym wear, but when I reached into my bag, there was nothing. I glanced around. The faces of the boys around me had amusement etched on them. I wasn't a fool. I knew one of them had taken it. So I stepped up. Has anyone seen my gym wear? I asked, forcing myself to maintain eye contact. The entire room fell silent. Again, I asked, but this time I mumbled to myself. If you see it, please return it. I have to be at gym. They snickered and went back to their discussions, completely ignoring me. I got the message and I went back to doing whatever they were doing before I'd stepped up. I stood there for a minute. My eyes watered and my lips trembled. I didn't understand why everyone was being mean to me. Hey, I'm sorry for what they did to you back at the locker room. I raised my eyes and nodded, unseeing. The tears clouded my vision, and at first I thought I was hallucinating. Why would anyone talk to me? But someone was. His eyes were gray, and he had the cutest smile for a boy. He was so pretty. I blinked twice and wiped my tears away. If you want, I can lend you mine. I've got a spare gym wear, he continued. When it was obvious that I wasn't going to reply to him, I opened my mouth to speak, but grew weirdly shy. He was the first person speaking to me kindly. And for some reason, my anxiety got the better of me. I shook my head from side to side and scurried away, mumbling under my breath. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Why didn't you say anything? Why was that so hard? At home, they didn't believe it when I told them I was having a hard time at school. Well, they didn't let me tell them the whole story. My mother's loud voice rang out from the kitchen. Chuishitane, shinpai yo, she said to me, which translated to, be careful, I'm worried about you. You shouldn't let the influence of other kids stop you from studying. Mom, no one's stopping me from studying, I replied, my voice shaky. This was the problem with my mom. She immediately interpreted everything as study-related. It reminded me of one summer back in Japan. I'd taken extra lessons that summer to help for the next school year, and every day my mother made sure I studied after each lesson. She never bothered about my social life. To her, I was doing very well, and she didn't care much about having a social life. We're Japanese, we have to work extra hard to fit in. You cannot let others distract you, Katsuki, she continued, her voice echoing in the kitchen. Beside me, my sister chuckled. Somehow, you managed to geek out in your new school, didn't you? Her voice was taunting and her eyes filled with amusement. I didn't reply to her. Experience has taught me that it was best ignoring my sister's jabs. The next week at school was easier. Of course, no one talked to me, but by this time, everyone pretty much stopped the bullying. I was being ostracized. I signed up for music class and it was the only place I didn't feel judged. It was pretty hard and the music teacher made everyone work extra hard. The other kids never had time to bully me or laugh at me. But still, I was alone and lonely. My thoughts were my only companion. Each time I wondered what I could have done differently. My first day in school, maybe. I shouldn't have worn these huge glasses. Maybe I shouldn't have smiled at everyone. I tapped my pen on the table as I thought. I got so lost in my thoughts that I began to mumble out loud. Geek, nerd, how was I? Because I wore glasses? How else was I supposed to see anything? Anderson, please focus, the teacher said to me, tapping my shoulder lightly. When I looked up, the whole class was looking at me. I felt self-conscious, but still managed to nod in response. Nico, please take the lead on the guitar, the teacher said. Nico came to the front of the class with a guitar strapped across his body. His hands strummed the strings and I felt goosebumps when he started singing. He was the only one who didn't find it weird talking to the new Asian kid. He was the only one who'd been kind. He played the guitar with such finesse and easily his fingers plucked at the strings, and a sweet melody was formed. I could never play as well as that, and I thought he was awesome, but I couldn't bring myself to say anything. Soon, music class became my favorite. It was the only time I got to see Nico perform. On more than one occasion, our eyes met, and I looked away, weirdly shy. Nico had a charm about him, an easy aura, but even with all that, I could not bring myself to talk to him. I didn't understand why. I never had problems making friends, but talking to Nico suddenly seemed harder than quantum mechanics. Eventually, I decided to avoid him totally. He made me feel things I didn't understand, but the universe was not having it. Everyone bring out your books and write this down, the math teacher Miss Willoughby scribbled an equation on the board. One I was familiar with. It was a quadratic equation. I want you all to solve it. I'll go around and inspect your work. I hurried to solve the problem, my hands flying over my book. Math was not a hard subject for me. In fact, it was one of my favorites. If I wanted to be an architect, I had to love math. Oftentimes, I'd catch my dad writing equations I didn't understand and scribbling numbers on his sketch pad. It was one of the reasons I had to fall in love with math. I wanted to do everything exactly the way my father did it. The math teacher made her way around the class, commending and scolding. I was so sure I was going to get commended, but when the teacher got to my table, she frowned. What is this, Katsuki? Got everything right, but the answer wrong. She bent and showed me my mistake. You shouldn't make mistakes like this, because they could cost you a lot, she advised, and moved to the next table. I felt like a failure. I had been so excited to solve the equation that I had failed it. I looked back at my paper and began to mumble, solving the problem and trying to correct myself. However, Miss Willoughby came back to me, her eyes blazing with anger. Katsuki Anderson, she bellowed. I will not tolerate any form of laziness in my class. Why are you mumbling? Trying to copy the answers? She asked, her face stern. This attitude will take you nowhere. I do not accept any form of malpractice. Now focus on your work. If I hear another word from you, she trailed off and walked away. I watched her walk away and I bit my lip nervously. What had I done wrong? Was I a total failure? The whole class laughed and snickered at me. My vision blurred, and I was helpless against the tears that fell. I felt like a mouse in a cage, and I felt like an utter failure. My school career was taking a bad turn. How was I to become an architect if I couldn't even solve an equation? I buried my face in my palms and rushed out of the classroom. In Japan, teachers only yelled at you if you were a total failure. I was so convinced that I was, which explained why I was in the bathroom crying. It's okay, Katsuki. It's Nico. I wiped my eyes dry and stepped out of the stall, but I couldn't help the sniffing. Our eyes met, and that tingling feeling I got whenever I watched them play started again. I lowered my eyes and began to mumble. Nico didn't laugh or snicker. He gently patted my back. "I think you're cute," I mumbled. But this time Nico could make it out. I raised my eyes to meet his and he smiled at me. I never felt like I belonged, but when he smiled at me, I felt like I did. Like it was okay to mumble, be the weird Asian kid. I couldn't tell what he was thinking, but he shook his head. "You have pretty eyes," Nico said to me. I blushed. I thought it sounded really gay that I found Nico to be pretty and he found my eyes to be cute. But he didn't make me feel embarrassed about it. "I'm Nico. You are?" His voice was warm and friendly and inviting. "My name is Katsuki, but I'm sure you know that already," I replied with a small smile. It was easy to talk to Nico. He didn't make me feel left out and different, even though we both clearly were. Nico had black-dyed hair and hazel eyes that seemed to be made of gold whenever he was out in the sun. And I was the perfect Japanese stereotype. We were so different, but our differences only attracted us to each other. We hung out a lot after that. Slowly, Nico became my best friend. We both knew we were attracted to each other, beyond being best friends. But we didn't want to cross that line yet, being fully aware of the homophobia around us. In turn, he made sure I joined him for dinner one Friday night. I'd never felt more at home around a complete stranger, and his family seemed to like me. It was an amazing night. The next day, which was a Saturday, he dragged me out to an art course. I was fast realizing that Nico loved art. It was his life's dream, just like mine, was architecture. And after the class, we took a stroll around the beach, barefoot. "Ready to tell me why you moved down here?" "I've always been curious," Nico asked while we walked. The wind ran through our hair and the sun created a warm, fuzzy feeling in me. He took my hand and held it. "It's okay if you don't want to tell me yet. No, it's fine." I stopped in my tracks and smiled up at Nico. "I moved here with my family because my dad has a project he's working on. He's an architect, you see. And I was so excited to come here because I wanted to be close to him." "Close to him? How?" Nico's face scrunched up in confusion. I chuckled. He was so cute. He was never around because of his work. It took him far away from us. But since we moved here, it's been easier since he doesn't have to travel anymore. Nico nodded, and we fell silent and continued walking. The feel of the sand in my toes was exhilarating. I'd never done this before. And even more with Nico by my side was a thrilling experience. The next day, which was a Sunday, Nico visited me, and I took him to my room and showed him all my multiple books on architecture and some of my drawings. I also showed him my Lego collection, the design I'd been working on since we moved out a month ago. In return, Nico played me a song of his, something he'd also been working on. Then we spent the entire afternoon listening to his songs and playing games on my PlayStation. I was finally happy I fit in somewhere. That place was with Nico. Whenever we hung out, I barely mumbled or whispered. He brought out a part of me that I didn't think capable. I was more confident, and at school no one messed with me anymore. I didn't sit alone at the cafeteria, and I had something to look forward to. But one day, Friday night, something changed. It was Mike Peterson's birthday party in downtown Florida, and Nico dragged me along with him. It was the first time I was attending a party. In Japan, all my friends were geeks and nerds like I was, so we never went for parties. When we arrived at the venue, which was a small cabin overlooking the ocean, I held on to Nico. "Relax, Katsuki. Follow my lead," Nico said, tapping my hand lightly. I stuck by his side the entire night and followed all his moves. Every time he drank, I drank. When he played cups, I played as well. I was cheered when I won, which made me loosen up a bit. It was hard to believe that I'd been bullied and made fun by the same people. I enjoyed the night. Nico and I danced and made fun of other drunk kids who'd passed out on the porch. Nico was pretty drunk and so was I. Eventually, we decided to go outside and sit on the shore. The night's breeze, the stars twinkling, added a mystical allure to the moment. Nico poked my hand and smiled. "When I'm with you, it's easier to breathe, Katsuki. Make my heart beat loudly in my chest. It's weird, right?" Nico slurred, then hiccuped. "I think I really like you, not just as my best friend. Sometimes I wonder what it would feel like kissing you," he said in between hiccups. I was taken aback, but it was cute, especially since I felt the same way about him. It was all so fast that I didn't know what to do. I bowed down to Nico, showing him respect like we did in Japan. There was something beautiful about that night. I'd never been attracted to anyone the way I was to Nico, so I didn't know what to do. Therefore, the moment Nico's lips met mine was kind of a jolt of electricity, a rush of emotions I'd never felt before. I was surprised, but in a good way. It was a weird sensation, but it felt right. It was as if all the pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. Nico's happiness was infectious, and I couldn't help but mirror his joy. It was the start of something beautiful, something that was ours. The next week, we spent the weekend at Nico's favorite art museum. It was our first secret date. I showed up wearing my best clothes and my new Nike shoes, and Nico dressed up like a high school jock, with a varsity jacket that matched his green sneakers. We walked by some of the art sculptures, and it was Nico's idea to pose as each one of the sculptures while we had people take pictures of us. It was magical to say the least, and I'd never been happier. We kept meeting up and having secret dates. We weren't ready to come out yet. That was fine by me, since I had no idea how my family would react. Every time we slipped into the art museum, my heart pounded like a drum. Nico and I, two figures lost in the grandeur of the exhibits, our laughter echoing off the marble walls. We'd mimic the poses of the sculptures. It was our guilty pleasure, and over the time it became a tradition. We'd sneak kisses beneath the soft glow of the museum lights, the taste of Nico's lips becoming my favorite form of art. We'd capture these moments with hushed whispers and secret photos. Our love story, hidden in plain sight. The thrill of our secret rendezvous was intoxicating, a heady mix of love and adventure that I savored. Outside, I was Katsuki, the well-mannered guy that everyone knew. But in the quiet corners of the museum, with Nico, it was just Katsuki, the guy who was head over heels in love. The difference was stark, like a black and white painting bursting onto color. Our secret dates were a little heaven, a world where we could be ourselves without any pretense. And every time we said goodbye, I looked forward to our next art museum date, eager to create more memories with Nico, not minding that I'd seen him at school the next day. Every day with Nico was a gift. The day of my sister's 25th birthday party was the day of joy, laughter, and unexpected revelations. Our home was buzzing with the infectious energy of our relatives and friends, their laughter and chatter echoing through every room. But amidst the celebrations, my heart pounded with a mix of excitement and fear. My sister had invited Nico, my secret love, to the party. We had been hiding our relationship for months, but as fate would have it, that day, everything changed. As the evening went on, I found myself drawn to Nico, his smile lighting up the room. We shared stolen glances, our secret a silent whisper between us, and oftentimes when we were sure no one would care if we were there, we would sneak off to my room, and we'd make out. The fear of being walked in on made it all the more exciting. But when my sister called for a group photo and asked for our relatives and their significant others to step forward, I instinctively pulled Nico next to me. It was much later I realized my mistake. I had been so carried away by my affection for Nico, the fun we were having, that I didn't think much of it. The room fell silent, the air thick with surprise. I could feel my cheeks burning, heart pounding in my chest. Everyone's eyes were on Nico and I looked to my feet, mumbling again. I did that whenever I was nervous. I hadn't meant to reveal our relationship in front of everyone like this. My sister, ever the peacekeeper, quickly diffused the situation. "Katsuki, you silly boy. I said significant others, not best friends. I guess you've always wanted a brother, too bad you got stuck with me." She turned to everyone, a bright smile plastered on her pretty face. He spent so much time with Nico since he had a rough time adjusting to life in America. For the first time in a really long time, my heart warmed with love for my sister. She was having my back, even though she didn't have to. I'd always regarded her as the type to watch things crash and burn, since she often got me in a lot of trouble with my mom growing up. I was in awe of how fast she'd been in thinking up a lie, something I wasn't able to do. I had frozen up, holding, instead to mumble that salvaged the situation. But she had introduced Nico as another brother, her words bringing laughter back into the room, but the damage was done. That night, I lay in my bed, a sting of embarrassment still fresh. My sister sat with me, her comforting words soothing my wounded pride. "How long have you known?" I asked my sister, my eyes watering. I felt like I'd done something terribly wrong. In fact, I'd been so ashamed in myself that I'd simply said goodnight to Nico and ran upstairs. I was certain that I'd ruined our relationship. Would he still talk to me after this? Would things still be the same? My sister smiled and punched my arm lightly. "Don't be stupid. I've known ever since you started hanging out with Nico. I noticed the way he looks at you. You showed him your Lego collection. You never show me, much less let me anywhere near it." I laughed, my worries forgotten in the moment. She made me laugh and I felt closer to her than I'd ever been. We'd promised each other that we would find a better, more appropriate way to share my truth with our parents. 2 months passed before we found the perfect opportunity. My dad, who was always engrossed in his work, finally had a day off. We invited both of our families for lunch at our home. The air was buzzing with anticipation as we prepared a special cake, a symbol of our announcement. The cake was simple yet elegant, its surface sparkling with edible glitter. The words, "We're in love," were written in bold, vibrant colors, a declaration of our feelings. Nico and I stared at the cake, not sure how to feel. I couldn't stop mumbling due to my anxiety, but Nico smiled down at me like everything was going to be all right. There was also my sister, who had her hands in everything. She made everyone feel comfortable. As we presented the cake, the reactions were a mixed bag. Oh, Nico, my dear boy. Nico's mother, an Auburn with charming smile and a southern accent, came to hug us both. We've always known. I knew the moment you tried on your mother's dress on your 16th birthday, Nico's dad said. His eyes twinkled with unshed tears as he hugged Nico and me. We'll always love you. There'll always be a place for you at home, he said, then looked at me kindly. You too, Katsuki. Nico's family, the Sullivans, were thrilled. They had always been supportive of Nico and his choices. My family, the Andersons, were taken aback. What's the meaning of this? My dad asked, his face masked with disappointment. I opened my mouth to speak, but my mother interjected. Why are you disgracing us? Her voice was shrill and filled with alarm. Her words rang in my ears. My eyes watered. They saw my love for Nico as a choice, not a problem, to be ignored. But their disappointment didn't faze me. I had Nico by my side, his hand in mine, a symbol of our love and commitment to each other. Strangely, the thought of being with Nico gave me strength. It was simple, really. I didn't even want to imagine what life held for me without Nico. And in that moment, I knew which choice I had to make. In that moment, I realized that family isn't just about blood relations. It's about the people who accept and love you for who you are. The people who stand by you in your darkest moments and celebrate your happiest ones. Nico's family had become my family too. Their acceptance, a warm embrace that I hadn't known I needed. My sister Nika squeezed my shoulder when I looked at her. She was smiling warmly at me. My parents, of course, had stormed off in anger. I thought silently to myself, it was my chances of learning from my father. But that didn't stop me. I know what I wanted to be, who I needed to be. And so what if I couldn't learn from my father like I wanted to? I was determined. I would go to school, take up extra lessons if I had to, go for internships, and take as many online courses as I needed to be an even better architect as my father was. It didn't change the fact that I still thought he was the best architect in the world. Conclusion. In the days that followed, my relationship with my own family became strained. They didn't understand. They didn't want to understand. But I held on. I had to. For Nico. For us. We spent our days reassuring each other. Our love, a beacon of hope in the storm. Eventually, my family came around. It wasn't a sudden change, but a gradual acceptance. They saw the love between Nico and me, saw how happy we were together. They began to understand that love isn't about gender. It's about the connection between two souls. My dad helped me out when he could at school. And even though he still didn't accept me fully, he supported my dreams and paid for my lessons whenever he couldn't give me lessons. The relationship with my family was still strained, but it was getting better. Some days my mom would pack food hampers for Nico and I. It was her way of showing us that she still loved me. Now, years later, I look back on those days with a sense of pride. Pride in who I am, who we are. Nico and I are still together, still in love. We have faced many challenges, but we have overcome them all, together. Our families have become one, their acceptance and love a testament to the power of love and understanding. My story isn't unique. There are countless others like me, like us, who have faced the same struggles, same fears. But through it all, we have found love, acceptance, and a sense of belonging. And that, I believe, is the most beautiful thing in the world. And so, my journey continues. A journey of love, acceptance, and understanding. A journey that started with a secret love and has led me to a place of happiness and contentment. A journey that I'm proud to call my own. The end. What do you think about intercultural dating? Do you have stories to tell? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become part of our Rainbow Force and stay wholesome.